thanks so much for being here today. You have a panel discussion later in the day, but if you could just start off by, telling the audience, who you are and a little bit of your background.
Sure. So look, Mark, I think my approach to cybersecurity has been very simple over my career. It's about making cybersecurity useful, understandable, and aligned to the business, because that's what it's about. We are here to protect our businesses and enable them and not hinder them. That's been my approach that I've taken through my career. I've been fortunate to have had multiple senior leadership roles in different countries across various industries, so financial services, energy, higher education, government. I think that's given me a good vantage point of the challenges and unique nature of threats that each organization deals with. I also am a big believer in this being a team sport, and we need to contribute to the body of knowledge and give back. So along those lines, I wrote a couple of books in cybersecurity that focus on the human factor and also how do you get professionals to operate at a level that delivers value to their businesses. So I think good to know that those books are doing quite well, which is always nice. Recently, I've also founded my own cybersecurity company called 7 Rules Cyber that is focused on leveraging strategy, architecture, and culture to solve complex cybersecurity challenges. And essentially, you do more security at a lower price point if you do it smartly. I think that's the idea. And look, I also hold a director role with ISACA, ISACA Sydney, where I encourage professional development of our membership, because there is so much changing, not just in cybersecurity, but technology overall. So how do we keep updated with that? How do we get our thoughts process aligned so that we're not just distracted by the shiny tool, but purposefully, meaningfully adopt them? So yeah, lots of different hats, but that's what keeps me going.
Yes, many hats indeed. So I think, one of the major themes of today, I think everyone agrees that, cybersecurity needs to be more proactive instead of reactive, and that there are new tools out there with machine learning and AI and threat detection, but easier said than done. And so given your experience, how can an organization even get started with this kind of transformation?
Yeah. Look, that's the main point, right? Is how do you get started? I think before we get down to threats or before we get down to, specific tools or processes, the first thing for organization is understanding the nature of your business. Because the nature of your business dictates the type of threats you need to be concerned about and the types of risks that are material to you. For example, if you are an e-commerce business, heavy web-facing presence, for you, the availability of your resources, availability of your websites during, key shopping dates is paramount. However, if you are an organization that does largely business-to-business type of relationships, is not as web-facing, but has a different set of data you need to concern about, well, that's a different set of threat. Same for financial services, where you need to think about fraud more so than some other industry verticals that don't need to. If you are in energy, you need to think about operational technology and safety. So you start there. You understand the nature of your business and the threats that matter to you. I think after that, the next step in the process is to figure out what do you really know so far. I think we have an understanding of your assets. Are you aware of the key assets that are material to your business, that bring in the revenue, that are key to delivering the services that your customer rely on? If you start with scoping that, I think that sets the good foundation for any meaningful threat management program. Because we mentioned threat management, so let's just think, what is threat management? Let's define that clearly. So threat management is different than vulnerability management. They get combined together, but they're different things. So vulnerability management, which we hear a lot about, is about patching and updating your controls in response to a weakness that is found. So it's a bit reactive in that sense. Threat management is more proactive. You're trying to get on the front foot before things happen. There are two key numbers that organizations need to think about when they think about threat management. One is if you think about the Ponemon report and what they issued in terms of studies, you see that the mean time to contain a cybersecurity incident, finding out and containing it, is approximately 270 days.
Wow.
That's one number. Okay. The second number is an average cost of a data breach is circa $4 million. These are the two numbers we really need to address to threat management. And that's what I always want to focus on. That's really the key. That's where the game is. So with threat management, there are different pillars to it. One pillar is around threat intelligence. Is your organization getting intelligence on the different threat activities that are out there, on what matters to you, on the strategic nature of those threats? So I think it's more of that exercise where you get the intelligence. The next step is modeling that. So there's threat modeling. So you have this data. Now you need to make it relevant to your business. And how would that how would those threats impact the different assets that we laid out earlier? The next pillar is analytics. So now you have all these different sources of data in your environment that your tools are producing. Maybe your endpoint protection tool, could be your network protection tool, your web gateways. I think having a way of analyzing that data so you can actually do something about the modeling exercise. The other pillar, which is an important pillar that I'm looking forward to speaking more on, is threat hunting. Now, that is a part of threat management, but it relies on all these three things that we talked about to actually take that information and then start looking in your environment for specific threat activity. You're probably looking for, could be a nation state actor or a specific criminal group, because there are ways these guys operate, right? So, I mean, there are patterns, there are vectors, there are, IP addresses, domains, all of that. And I think threat hunting is an exercise that can allow for that to happen. So at a high level, I think this is what threat management is. And this is, I think if you start with your business, start with your risk, start with your assets, this is how we can make it more meaningful as opposed to just going down a technology tool set path or wasting your money.
Very interesting. And you've obviously done a lot of this kind of mapping and introspection before. So thank you for sharing that. The threat hunting is interesting to me because I think it's something a lot of organizations don't do yet, but it sounds like maybe they should. How does an organization get even started? Like, what's the best practice specifically with threat hunting in your view?
So look, I mean, if you think about threat hunting, in the past, it used to be really, really expensive, really complicated, was only reserved for a select few. I think that's changed. So if you are leveraging a lot of mature public cloud services or cloud providers, could be Azure, could be others, you actually have a lot of native capability to do threat hunting. So you don't, I think that's where I try to create awareness that there is a lot out there that you can easily start leveraging. Now, a common mistake that people make is they try to look for everything and anything. I don't think you want to approach it that way. You want to go in what is called as a hypothesis in threat management and threat hunting, but it's really scenarios. Pick your scenario, and then you're trying to test that scenario out. And a scenario could be a specific threat actor trying to exploit a specific application through a specific mean. And does that activity exist? So that's what you look for. But you need to have your logs. You need to have data for you to do hunting against. So I think that's where it needs to start, which is why I said if you have native cloud capabilities, leverage those because that's the most meaningful starting point. You can also leverage industry frameworks, and that's another way you can think about it. There is MITRE ATT&CK framework, which is really popular. That has, I encourage our listeners to go and take a look at that framework. It has a great detailed breakdown of different ways attackers can target organizations and, all the permutations and combinations. That's one way. There's also Microsoft's Stride approach that you can look at. So I think pick a framework, think about your hypothesis, and then start to play with that within your environment. A common challenge is if you don't have your scenario played out, you will not get the right results and you would overwhelm yourself. There'll be too many things for you to look at. It's actually okay to start small and start with a small or a reasonable time horizon. Don't try to look through, history, which is going to be too hard for you. So you're trying to first understand how you can best maximize the value of it. So start small, start slow, but rely on industry frameworks. And most of these platforms I've been talking about do have MITRE ATT&CK and other things mapped in already. So you can leverage them upfront. So, but first step is just think about the MITRE ATT&CK framework, take a look at that, see what you think, and that'll help you then get with the tools.
Interesting. So let's add AI and ML into the discussion. What do you see happening with AI, machine learning, automation? Are these things that are available now that organizations are using now, or is this more of a goal?
No, look, I think it's available now and it's being used quite a bit. So it's important to understand where they can help and where they cannot, right? So if we think about artificial intelligence, machine learning, I think the value they add is pattern recognition and very quickly correlating data sets. That becomes really hard for human analysts to do or really tedious, and it really results in burnouts. I think that's where it really helps. It helps you go beyond the traditional signature-based analysis. And I think that's where the value comes in, is the more proactive nature of things. So a lot of the tools that we start to see, in this new generation of security technologies such as XDR, EDR, I think they have a level of artificial intelligence built in. Now, I think we need to be careful on kind of overstating its importance sometimes, because you need to see really what you're trying to get out of it. Like everybody will tell you they have AI, like, but what does it really mean?
Right.
How does it really get you the value proposition that you're after? The other aspect to that is automation. So AI ML can help you with pattern recognition, with potentially triaging a set of things that you need to think about, because any analyst has faced this problem of too much data. And that's just really hard, or data from so many different sources. So that's a separate problem we can talk about in terms of how you think about your tool sets and optimizing them. But focusing now just on the idea of AI ML, the other thing is automation. It's important to recognize that you generally can only automate what you know and what you can handle. So is there a process there already? You can't automate things you haven't done before. So I think that's where the manual process and having a good sense of how you would handle these things, and then you can start automating them. So you start with automating the process that you're already aware of. I think that's where it can become quite helpful. We talked about AI ML and I mentioned tools. So on an average, roughly, most enterprises, if you think, have circa 75, 76 security tools, right? It's really hard, because if you pick a scenario of, say you were trying to protect yourself against attacks which are, web-facing data loss type stuff. So you might have a secure web gateway. You might have a CASB, a cloud access security broker. You could potentially have a zero trust network access. You could have these different tools. If you are trying to get logs from all these different sources and trying to create something that correlates them through a business intelligence application, it's really hard, really tedious, and you're spending money, licensing, maintenance, you're spending money on training people, on your analysts for all those things. You need to be smarter about that. And that's where some of the new offerings that exist, such as Secure Service Edge, they can help you consolidate those. But you need to be, like I always say, intentional about that. You need to see what you're willing to trade off, what capabilities you absolutely want to have that will require a point solution that is expert in that field, and what capabilities you're okay with it being, a little bit lower, but that'll help you consolidate all these other things. That's where actually AI, ML, and having some of that incorporated in these new generation tools will come and help you, because it can help triage some of these things, because we have this problem of analyst fatigue, of missing things because of all these data points that are not looked at. So yeah, look, I think we're not there yet 100% on what it could be. The world's changing as we speak. ChatGPT made AI a commonplace, but there's so much more to it. So I think that'll come, but we need to be more methodical about how we approach it, because a big problem with AI, and this is not security tool specific, but it's really, it's algorithms, is the data that has gone into it, and making sure that, you have mechanisms by which that data is not poisoned. Otherwise, the stuff that you rely on to help you is going to give you faulty alerts. And that's where, if we get completely out of the business of human analysts, well, how that's going to work. So I think that's where the more intentional nature of it comes in.
It's interesting you mentioned that, because this morning, the biggest complaint that the CISOs had in my session was that the tools just keep piling up. And so do you think that AI and ML are really going to make this consolidation that we've been talking about happen, or do you think that they'll continue to pile up?
Look, I don't think AI and ML by itself make it happen. I think what is possibly going to happen is, in my view, is you will have new generation of tools that have AI ML kind of baked in and have built with that in mind, which can then potentially start replacing the use cases that exist. Because really where we need to start is, why do these tools exist? I mentioned the example earlier of these 3 different tool sets. They all exist for a different purpose. One exists to do your URL filtering, ensuring that you are connecting to web with a secure web gateway. Others, CASB, thinking about your SaaS applications. Now, you need to think about a threat profile in your business, and that's what I started with. For you, if your biggest risk is in these areas, well, you probably want to keep one of these tools. But if you think that actually, no, by the virtue of me migrating onto this one solution which can combine capabilities of these 3 or 4 solutions, and I'm okay to live with a lower level of sophistication perhaps in one of these areas, that's fine. I think so consolidation will come with educated trade-off decisions. To be honest, Mark, I think the biggest problem is people don't even have a handle of the inventory currently. They don't even know how many security tools are running in an environment. They know the ones that they might be running in cyber teams, but how many are being run by other teams? And if those tools actually have the right use cases enabled, just because you flicked a tool on, are the right use cases? Does it have the right coverage? And a lot of times technical debt has been accumulated and your security tools fall because of that reason. Because there was point-in-time solutions and you bought them and now you're stuck with a multi-year contract. So it's hard for you to rip it off. So I think those factors play into the consolidation conversation. So if you start with a good enterprise security architecture upfront where you start documenting it, you have some sensible principles on how you're going to approach it, the trade-offs that you're going to make, I think that's going to set you up on the journey.
Very interesting. So I think the message that I'm hearing from you is that a lot of companies need to do a lot of introspection when it comes to security.
100%. I think we always say that we need more budget, but I think sometimes if you look in closely, there is so much optimization that we can do and then spend money wisely on what actually needs to be done is to be more proactive.
Very interesting. Well, that's the time we had, but this was very insightful. So thank you so much.
No, thank you. Thank you for the opportunity.